Good afternoon. This is Indigenous Voices. This is Laura Shadley. Hope you all are enjoying the day today. Sorry about the late start. We had, again, technical difficulties, but that's a common thing on my show anyway, so apologize. But today we're in the studio with David Pleasant. He is a... it always throws me off, but they understand, everyone who listens. David is a professional percussionist, a composer, writer, recording artist, researcher, independent scholar, and arts activist. And he's also a Savannian, native Savannian, born and raised, and Gullah-Geechee.
Yeah, well, that's where I grew up. I grew up on the island of Sapelo and in McIntosh County in Darien, and kind of made a big loop between there and Savannah and New York City, as a matter of fact. It was pretty confusing, but it gave me sort of a background that I now greatly appreciate.
Okay. So today we're going to be discussing your organization, or it's not really an organization. What are we calling it?
It's more of a campaign, maybe, or maybe a movement, because you're right, it isn't an organization like in the advocacy sense or in the reform sense. It's like the beginning of a certain kind of movement that we're looking to promote and have people become sensitized to in the city. They'll help transform some of the narratives of the city as they are.
So we're going to be talking about which way Savannah, ? Which way do we want to go? From where we've been heading to what direction are we heading in the future? Okay, so tell us a little bit about your background.
Wow, okay.
Just a little
Born
bit.
in Savannah, but, I grew up out on Sapelo Island where my mother was a teacher and actually the principal on Sapelo, and that's why I had like an interface with a lot of people who would become Georgia Sea Island singers, or Cornelia Bailey, the writer of the book on Gullah-Geechee culture called Dr. Buzzard. My mom taught her and taught a lot of the Georgia Sea Island singers, and I was able to see like firsthand some of the stuff that was going on the island, and lived there, and people took care of me when I was a little kid, and I traveled. I think we traveled from the island to Savannah to Atlanta on various trips when my mother was taking great groups of kids around from the island to see different parts of the state, if not the country. And it was a culture that fascinated me. As a tiny kid, I just knew something. I don't know. It was just something there. And then later, like, there were some profound things that kind of happened in my life that I just had to, as a musician now, professional composer or writer, things that touch me from Gullah-Geechee culture that I can't really explain. It was like a power. And once that hit me, it's like it just completely transformed my life. I was originally like on the road to be probably a concert timpanist in symphony orchestras. I did all the music stuff here in Savannah in the state, like all state and governor's honors, and I would be like the principal percussionist or timpanist in these things where you had to compete and all. And then at some point, something hit me from that past reference, and I knew I had to put my hands on skins rather than put sticks on skins in that way. I had to play tambourines. I had to explore body percussion. I delved heavily into Georgia Sea Island singers and Bessie Jones and some of the culture that comes from this region. And I spent like a lifetime going across the planet in the United States, nationally, in various ways, teaching about the culture and history from here as it's associated with the music. And the important part of that is the music and culture that comes from here, number one, is being like a primary platform for most stuff we know as music and culture in the United States. In various ways it is. It's also a music that has roots in a political tradition, happening events that are like primary focal points for African-American culture and American culture in general, right out of this region. So it just has this great power and authority that's just so magnificent. That's Gullah-Geechee.
Yeah. So you sent me a song that you wanted me to play. It's Moses, Moses, Don't Get Lost, from John Davis and the Georgia Sea Island Singers. Did you want me to share that now, or you want to talk a little bit more?
You can play it. It's a wonderful example of some of what I'm saying. I'll just give a little preface. We have to understand that the way that popular music and all are done now based out of harmony that's like coming from Western tradition. People in this area did not necessarily do that. They did something different. It was more African-based, and then more an amalgamation of African musical forms and technologies that use parts of Western culture, or sometimes even by force or by circumstances, they amalgamated those things. So the way that harmony is done, the way rhythm is called polyrhythm, many different rhythms at the same time, the way people use what people would normally call accompaniment, it's just a whole different conception and understanding of how music is done and the links of that music to one's self, one's political presence, one's spiritual presence, one's relationship in community.
Why is it important for people to understand this? Because we went to an event, I'd say, the other day, where we were playing different types of music, but you were explaining how we were still missing the truth of the music here, like the real sound of the Gullah-Geechee people.
Well, it's the sound, but it's more than the sound, because in any African-based music, you have what Francis Bebe would say. It's like, you don't have somebody trying to make pretty sounds or do something that's necessarily even pleasing to the ear. You have a presentation and representation of life in all its aspects. This is one of the things that's very different about African music, African-based music, and Gullah-Geechee music as well, because it carried that, as well as early blues. I wouldn't say modern blues, but early blues most definitely was carrying that idea of music and movement and motion. The motion of the body itself is being a rhythm and vibration itself, being outside even of what you hear. It's not even about what you hear. Sometimes it's just what's present in this vibratory form, and how that vibration and relationship with the earth, with spirituality, with the presence of other people kind of galvanizes a particular community spirit. Bessie Jones called it drum folk. And it's very interesting because drum folk tradition, which is what she, the name she gave to Gullah-Geechee people and African-American people in general, but particularly Gullah-Geechee, it meant that the drum wasn't a thing that you play on. A drum was just the person himself or herself. You carry that kind of feeling through, and it's a matter of a communication of that spirit, that spirituality, that essence and ancestral presence, which is not yesterday, not then, not looking back, but always with you now, as well as understanding that your presence now means that you are already an ancestor to those who will come. So you have a certain responsibility, accountability, and like even in a quantum sense, an entanglement with past, present, and future that's quite different than front and back, first, last, up, down, that sort of relationship. And that's the essence of polyrhythm, which lives in this music.
Yeah, me and David have been having a lot of conversations lately about absolutely everything, but one of the things of, and why this is important to understand, is that people who come here for tourism, or people who even live here who don't truly understand the truth of the history in Savannah, and the present day situation as it is, just understanding that there's a whole other narrative that no one's telling, and no one is around to really share either. I think it's interesting, the things that David's been sharing with me. I'm learning a lot more about Savannah that and I've been here 11 years, and I still just barely scratching the surface of what really happened in this area as far as Indigenous people and the Gullah-Geechee, the slave narrative, and all of that. So it's been really interesting. So we'll play this song for you.
Oh, Moses, Moses, don't get lost in that Red Sea. March on and come across. Oh, in that Red Sea. Oh, Moses, Moses, don't get lost. Oh, in that Red Sea. March on and come across. In that Red Sea. Let's just talk about the Most High. Let's talk about the Most High. Let's talk about the Most High. Let's talk about the Most High. Ain't no Pharaoh in the Most High. Pharaoh in the Most High. Ain't no Pharaoh in the Most High. Pharaoh in the Most High. Oh, Moses, Moses, don't get lost. March your Lord and come across. Stop and talk about the Most High. stomping, talk about the host that then old Pharaoh and host that Pharaoh and host that oh, Moses, don't get lost. Smart your Lord and come across. Stomping, talk about the host that talk about the host that stomping, talk about the host that talk about the host that then old Pharaoh and host that Pharaoh and host that then old Pharaoh and host that Pharaoh and host that hey, Moses, don't get lost. March your Lord and come across. Stop now, talk about the host that talk about the host that stop, let's talk about the host that talk about the host that
Wow, that was really amazing. I don't hear stuff like that all the time.
That's
I mean, I think I've heard something similar. I think it kind of reminds me of like the Chain Gang songs in a way, like the rhythm. But that was beautiful.
I mean, for me, it's just, the level of complexity and rhythmic complexity. I listened to it many times and over, and if you were to have to write it, like if you had a composer and then he had to do some graphic representation of it, I can tell you it would be near impossible to do that. Even a harmonic one, because some of the ways that they're using the notes and bending them and twisting them, add them in with different kinds of textures, and the way the rhythm is, it's not a unison rhythm, and it's what some might even call a raggedy style rhythm, or it's hyper syncopated, if anything. And of course, we know ragtime music, and that's one of the implements of ragtime music was this particular kind of syncopation and polyrhythmic form, distilled in a way that was more palatable, so it could be like a popular music. But this is like what it comes from. I'm a rhythm coach too, and a composer, as I said before, and sometimes musical director of different groups. I worked extensively with a dance ensemble, an international dance ensemble called Step Africa, and I trained them for about 6 years, and had various contracts with them to come in and work in these different rhythmic platforms. And they actually do a piece that I wrote called Drum Folk. Now they travel it around. And one of the interesting things, like stepping, is a little different because, it's a collegial thing. So there's a matter of a particular uniformity. They try to get in precision of movement and a unison movement. And I guess they were going more form with things that are modern or technological, or maybe represented as showing that we can do that too kind of deal, because we're in college. So we're studying in Western culture, Western way, or Western platform, which is the college. So now we'll do movement in that way. But at the same time, you have two things working. You have that, and it's underlined by things like this, because that particular group brought me in to teach them those more sophisticated polyrhythmic forms, so that everything wouldn't be just based on one, format, because the rhythm structures that they use, say in a John, oh, Moses, don't get lost in that Red Sea. You have something a little more sophisticated and polyrhythmic. And with that comes just a whole notion of how to orchestrate sound in the body, in the drum folk tradition, where the body itself becomes the vocality. The drum is a voice. That's like an article I wrote like back in 2004 that was in, I think it was in Brooklyn Rail magazine. And I talk about that, why the drum is indeed the voice. In African traditions, African societies, often the drum was used, to call and to communicate and do different things. And in here, of course, we lost a lot of the languages. I got this kind of super polyglot circumstance where there were all these languages fragmented together, which kind of give us Gullah-Geechee in part, mixed with English. But the drum started to become an implement that was used in different ways, where people didn't have the specificity, but it still carried the same power, resource, and spirit to galvanize people. Let's say for the United States, Stono in South Carolina was a point of rebellion in 1739. What led Stono in that rebellion and galvanized people was the drum. was the drum and signal horns, but particularly the drum was what caused people to come together and lead them from place to place during this revolution that happened there, and it moved further down into Georgia. After that, they had actually banned drumming, signal horns, and all African practice and ways in 1740, 1741, over that time period. And that's kind of like the beginning of African American culture, because you weren't allowed to openly practice or do or have African implements available. So African American people, Creolized African people now, started forming different ways to promote the same thing. They started using their hands, stamping their feet, clapping their hands, using their voices in different kinds of ways, doing what they call hand plays or ring shout, and these various ways of kind of reinventing the drum. Sometimes the whole architecture would be the drum. Like they go into what they call a praise house, and you bang a stick on the floor in the McIntosh County style, and the sound from that stick and the vibration from that stick made the whole church a drum, an idiophone, and the people in it then become that drum also. So it's a whole nother way of understanding, looking at rhythm as well. One of the basic things is, in African American pop culture, it's 2 and 4. Everything is backbeat. In Gullah-Geechee form, in early African form, things fall to the 1 and to the 3. So it falls in a way that people usually might say a European format, 1, 2, 3, 4. But the way that it does that, like you just heard in that bit, changes everything, changes the whole world.
Yeah, I've always been pulled towards that, the style of music, whenever I've ever had the chance to learn about it or watch. I mean, it's in different movies and things. It's still nothing like what you've been showing me or teaching me, but I think it wakes up something inside of all people that we really don't understand. At least it does for me, I know. And I don't know where that comes from. I really don't. It's just something I've always intuitively understood or been drawn to, and wanting to understand more of where that comes from and what kind of language. It's like a language. It's like a story. It's like a whole intricate narrative. I don't even know how to explain it. Yes.
It's the whole person.
It wakes
the whole
you up.
community.
Yeah, it really wakes
and
something up inside of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I wanted to say something about nature too, because if you listen close, like if people get a chance to go back and listen to that Moses song and listen to it, man, does it. And I did this when I worked with this theatrical piece called, what was that? Crowns, right? I did the music composition and performed it and wrote pieces for it. And also it's one of the I think it's the longest running regional play in the country, and has been for about 10 years. It just tours all the time. It just cycles. And when I was working with a group in Chicago, preparing them to do the piece, and with a new composer, I told them what we have to learn to do is be the tree and not the house. Not something that's constructed in man-made form in right angles, circles, squares, and triangles, but something like leaves on a tree, limbs on a tree. If you listen to the way John Davis and those do rhythm, it's like leaves on a tree. There's no perfect leaf. There's no perfect symmetry and form. It even gets faster, something that was frowned upon. But back in one time, getting faster with beats and stuff was a thing that was tolerable. Why? Because in African ritual culture and ancestral culture, beats sped up when people did things like ring shouts or drumming plays. Like the beats would get faster and people become more ritually intense and become to possession states. It wasn't about laying back in the back beat and being sort of anesthetized by a beat or grooved out. It was about another kind of insistence and voice that was coming in and through the drum and through the people, and it was a motivator, a spark, a quickening. This is what the drum is about. It's like a voice that is speaking to you and with you and through you to motivate you and inspire you and bring you to something. It's different than being, comforted or lulled back into something. It has that power too, but there's a time when that power can be exploited to make you go to sleep or relax too much.
Yeah, we have the same, I guess, with the indigenous culture here. Drum beats are some of the first sounds we hear because we go to the powwows, we listen to that drum. That's where we learn about how, well, at least from what I remember, because I was, obviously you learn in your everyday life, but the powwow was the way that we learned about the music and what the drum meant and how to tune ourselves into that same beat, the heartbeat of your community, of Mother Earth. So I grew up with that sound, and so every time I hear a drum of any kind, it just brings something alive inside of me. Oh yes. So we're gonna take a quick break and do the announcements, I think, and come back and talk about Which Way Savannah and indigenous culture and tourism and all kinds of other stuff. So we'll be back in just a minute.
You are listening to WRUU LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul.
So I don't have a donation thing on here. I couldn't find one. So if you're just tuning in, this is Indigenous Voices with Laura Shadley, and I have David Pleasant with me today in the studio, which I rarely have the honor of having anyone in here with me, so it's a little different. We just listened to a song called Moses, Moses, Don't Get Lost by John Davis and the Georgia-Sea Island Singers, and I'm going to share that on the Facebook page with the lyrics on there too, but I do encourage you to just close your eyes and listen and see what you can hear and feel while you're listening to it. So, yeah, I'll put that on the page. All right, David. So we're talking about, we've had a lot of conversation about the narrative here in Savannah and how Indigenous culture has all but disappeared. Well, it has disappeared. When we were at that event the other day, someone told me there was a Native American museum. I didn't know that. Been here 11 years and did not know that. We hear a little bit about Tomochichi and Oglethorpe's relationship, friendship, whatever. And the narrative here and like a lot of the tourism is the slave narrative, and that's about as far as you get. And it's really not told, I believe, in a very real way. I really honestly, I get physically ill being around some of these tour guides and the way they're telling things. That it feels so one-sided, and I don't know. I can't be downtown a lot actually anymore because I just don't like the way it's just like Disneyland. I call it Disneyland down here. It's all set up in a way to tell a certain kind of a story, and it leaves so much out. And so we've been talking a lot about the history, that you've done a lot of research on the history here, as well as being a Savannah native, born and raised here. So what can you tell me about Savannah? What spurred you to start the Which Way Savannah group?
There's a lot. Wow, what you just said. There's so many ways.
We got 25 minutes. 20
I
minutes.
know, and things I could say. I have personally taken this Gullah-Geechee culture, early African American music culture from this region, and I've taken it worldwide. Every place from Italy to Israel to Brazil, and work with it in different formats, teaching people about this area culture here. I would say that first off, what you're saying is so true about the way the narrative is done here, which was recognized a long time ago, and we'll get to the NPS study in a minute. It's no mistake that it's being done this way because there were options. What I wanted to do 12, 13 years ago when I started what was the parent of this WWS, Which Way Savannah, which was the AALIS, which is African American Ancestral Legacy Initiative Savannah. I introduced a lot of those counter narratives and the idea of escape, rebellion, and freedom as being the central point in the idea of making this area, this region, Savannah in particular, a mecca for study, research, not tourism. We need something different than tourism, which is a thing that just has to be completely redone, like the whole concept, because that's just trivia, entertainment, alcohol, food. It's like fun times. And you have something here like Native American, African history. Obviously, you can't make that fun and entertainment and stuff. Something else has to happen because there's a buried narrative here. I call it a standing narrative because it's here and it's present with us, but it hasn't had its opportunity or time because it's been submerged in oligarchy, the Confederacy, and colonialism, and that's done on purpose. Yes, a Disneyland was made, and people, because I know some of the people who worked in, and they use that language. They wanted to Disneyfy this thing and present it this way, and it's damaging. It's damaging to the archive. It's damaging to the way things are done. Outside of here, I've done many different things, and from television to Broadway, all these different things where I've infused either Native and or African Gullah-Geechee culture. One of the last things I did was Princeton and Slavery Project, which is a cooperative project with the author Sander Weiss and Eric Foner, who's most famous for his work in Reconstruction. And I presented these kinds of musics and song and background work with the actors who were like from all over, trying to get this point through about these relationships of slavery and what they meant, and that there were other counter narratives and powers in that moved to the present. So slavery isn't something that happened with a bunch of people in gray clothes with their head down and, that was so bad. And it was victimhood. Involved in slavery was also escape, freedom, and rebellion, which is the centerpiece, actually, of the drum culture that comes from here on a number of levels, not just Stono. Stono was what happened in South Carolina with the drum moving into Savannah. There was a Catholic priest here in Savannah, helped Stono rebels get further south. Important for a number of reasons. They were going to a Spanish garrison in Florida, as well as some of those people broke off into the different palenques in partnership with Native American people, Seminole people, who are hiding out also and trying to defend themselves from their lands being encroached upon and resisting slavery, like in total. So the drum, again, is a voice. It's not just a sound. It's not just an entertainment, like a tourism thing. Tourism can be damaging and demoralizing to communities. It can turn people who would have been professionals, educational leaders, people who would have stood tall doing different kinds of things. It reduces the whole environment into a service industry. And that doesn't really help people grow and be in their fullness. It particularly doesn't help people whose narratives are being crushed or disappeared in a circumstance where this great profit is being made off of that at the expense of a more profound heritage and legacy, as well as the spiritual connection and contact ancestrally to the people who suffered before. Why do I say that? Sometimes there's an idea of looking at people in ancestral presence or a spiritual legacy in one kind of tone. This even bell ring tone, but I can tell you it's polyrhythmic, okay? There are a lot of different parts. There's different sinew, there's different sophistication and complexity to go with the narratives that exist here in terms of ancestral presence. There were people who were enslaved, there was a suffering, but there was a fight back and a pushback that was constant by the people who lived here. A guy, this is recently, we talked to him, he said the other night, proof is that I'm here, that they succeeded, which is true. But once you're here, what do you do? Now it's time to succeed in another way and be as powerful and assertive as those people were in order for you to be here. You can't just lie back and say, I'm here, and then that's it. And you go do whatever, eat cornflakes or do whatever comes out through the media or what have you, or through entertainment or through tourism, and you sit with that. There has to be that same impulse that they were willing to fight with everything they had not to be enslaved or present a situation where they would finally be free. We have the obligation now, and if indeed we are connected with those ancestors and that spirituality, we have to gain that warriorship back and claim it as it is. That doesn't mean go pick up something that hurts. That's not what this is about. It's about the level of epistemology. What does that mean? Worldview, like the way people see things and do things. So by changing a narrative from oligarchy, confederacy, and colonialism, which is what it is now, whether people want to accept it or not, this is the cornerstone of the Confederacy, literally. We could get in that discussion later, but formally it is that this is what it is now. It's tourism that has its inception from that narrative, and that sub-theme and motif is what draws people here. They want that. They want the good old days narrative. They're looking for that. But there's a way to have other narratives which are completely submerged here and disappeared come out and be asserted as a matter of feeling, the feeling of the whole city and where that is, as a matter of what they call infill, how places are like built up or certain categories of behavior and performance are built up in the city in very formal terms, and how people just feel generally about where they are and what the narrative is of that place. Is it entertainment and tourism, or is it a place where people actually come to learn, where other people are powerful and empowered by their histories and ancestries, and they have jobs and opportunities based off of those things, and it's possible to do that. That's what WWS is for. Which way, Savannah? We're saying which way. Okay, towards a legacy that continues out of escape, freedom, and rebellion, transforming the narrative of the city in a way that allows people to prosper in those terms and disallows people to profit in the other way, which is going on right now.
Yeah. Wow. Blow my mind every time I have a conversation with you. Yeah. I don't know what to say to that, but, yes, let's let's do this.
Well, we have, the WS is not, it's not fluff and it's not wind. It's not just air. We have very specific things like later platforms for everything, how to do it and all that. And I can tell you since the time of the AAA LIS, when all those things 12, 13 years ago, when I presented the very same kinds of things, I went on a mad, thing, just an energized sort of hiatus, went and wrote about 15 plays that showed different people, aspects of this city's history that displayed these things in that narrative of escape, freedom, and rebellion. I did a little conference thing and brought people from the city from different areas to come in and hear, and I told them, some of the ideas and ways we could do it and get it started, and they turned a deaf ear to it, and then now it became what it is. So opportunities were there before. Now the opportunities come back again, and I have double time now. I'm older and smarter and all that stuff, and more experienced, and have stuff doubled up now, along with all the ideas and programs, platforms, and actual plays that I had before. I have a whole new platform of things now for developing opportunity in the city for people based off our ancestral legacies and narrative. Not just some special people going to different sites and then they become the mouthpieces or arbiters for the whole community. No, have the community hands-on, dirty hands invested archaeologically in their own, the promotion of their own cultural legacy. Everything from food to exercise to art to culture to science. Archaeology is the perfect thing. Why? Because archaeology involves everything, every physical science. Kids in this city could be motivated and moved to do things they never have explored before. They could be tie-ins with different ancestral or historic things, and a whole platform, a new way and variety of doing culture and music and science and things. And the city could happen, and it's doable. It's as simple as us just doing it and demanding and asserting that these things be done in lieu of, alcohol and food and entertainment as being like primary things. These should be primary things. Then the other part, that's just the flavor, the dessert, the ice cream. It shouldn't be the main course. This, I assert, is the main course.
Yeah, I'm having so many thoughts while you're talking, because I, even just trying to raise money for even Standing Rock, the only venues available are like bars. I despise going to bars, period. But everything is actually based on what you can how you can raise money around drinking down here. Every single fundraiser that I've ever
was just on today.
Yeah,
New jobs through alcohol.
Yeah, and then also it's a lot of service jobs. I don't know about you, but I'm tired. I mean, I got a good job. I mean, I don't really consider it a job. I really enjoy doing it, but I got lucky, and it was after a string of really crappy service jobs. But I just feel like the Black community, Indigenous community can do so much better. We have so much more to offer. We're not just players in somebody else's movie. We need to stop being that.
Right,
we need to stop and
start the sidekick.
Yeah, I'm tired of being.
I mean?
I don't want to be Tonto. I'm no Tonto.
There we go.
So we need to be telling our own stories. Yeah.
That's funny you say that, because I had done an action. Actually, I was at. I graduated from New York Tisch School of Arts, right, in performance studies, and one of my last things I had to do for my master's thesis was an action. The action I did was go to National Museum, American Museum of Natural History, and up front, and there was a large sculpture done by Fraser, who loves the phrase. And when he explains why he did the sculpture, he says, well, I hate the phrase myself. Going forward, which is a phrase from that particular imperialist time in United States history. Going forward, not really looking back, but going forward. And it has Teddy Roosevelt on a horse looking heroic. And beside him is a sidekick Native American, a sidekick African. So we did an action where we took about 20 or 30 students, and I dressed as an African, there was a woman dressed as Native, and we walked up the steps and we said, we don't want that here anymore. And other people, I had Ida B. Wells on another side. I'd written a piece with her having a big argument with Susan B. Anthony. It was really interesting about lynching and why she wouldn't get involved, because all those things kind of went together around the same period, the same time. All those different challenges and changes, the women's movement or white women's movement at that time, not being able to coalesce with the black anti-lynching campaign and the movement of black people in general, even though Ida B. Wells and Frederick Douglass and many others were trying to push that to happen, but it didn't happen. Maybe it was, it got lost at that time. time. So there was a lot of ferment in that time. And at that time was when that kind of image going forward with, you know, the black man and the native man and native people, black people as sidekicks to this, you know, great white vision. And we just had a field day out there, you know, challenging that and saying, you know, it's possible to do something different. We can have something different presented, you know, and if this is in front of the museum and our children come and see this, regardless of what you think somebody's saying, oh, that's what this is, you know, a heroic white man with a Native American assignment. They don't have to say it because the kids learn stuff is there. When they see it, it means something. If it's not in a context where things are properly understood and fleshed out, when it's in some, not in something beyond a distilled tour narrative, which is a particular motif and limited narrative and language of exposition. You need something more sophisticated when you're dealing, now I'm back to Savannah, with African and Native people, because something much more sophisticated, powerful, and beautiful, outrageously beautiful, just as a matter of history and people and community that was here and that happened here. You know, and that includes their rebellion, escape, and freedom narrative. It has to be told.
Yeah, you made me reminded me that well, all of our stories are are told. And my words just kind of got lost. I got lost in everything you were saying.
I'm sorry.
On settlers' terms, every single bit of history and stories and anything that's ever done is on settlers' terms. And I just even the story of Tomochichi and Oglethorpe, and so. When they're telling that story here about how Savannah was created, Savannah's creation story, it's always, Oglethorpe and Tomochichi were friends, you know, and that's how, like, Tomochichi just handed everything over. I think he's very upset with what's going on here. I think his story is not completely honored. His contribution to the whole situation, and I don't know the whole history. It's very hard to find a lot of the truth. In Savannah, and I haven't visited the museum, like I said, and there's not a lot of books in libraries. I've looked for anything on Indigenous people in libraries, the libraries here, and there's almost nothing. And
we know what's in that square, though. Where Gordon's monument is. That for me, that says it all. You know, there's no making up for that, having, you know, an industrialist, you know, monument 4 stories tall literally on Tomochichi's chest. And a guy whose industrialization through railroads helped, you know, make slavery bigger and more profitable, and industrialize slavery in a high, you know, to a high end through, you know, the transport of cotton, which of course is a worldwide like phenomenon and fueled greatly, obviously, by an area like Savannah and places near like it. So, wow, you know.
So I'm going to share some more of your information on the Facebook page, but did you want to share the poem that you wrote? It's called Tomochichi's
Yeah, I do,
Chest?
but you know, I would like to read something if you don't mind from...
We have about 5 minutes.
Wow, okay, from an archaeologist named Dan Sayers, who's actually doing work at Dismal Swamp, which is like Okefenokee Swamp in terms of it being a place where people hid out, when Okefenokee is more like Native American people and African people hid there and fought back the government, you know, General Jessup and those for years over control. But in Dismal Swamp, there was a lot of people who ran away. And he has to say this, and I think it's relevant to Savannah. By downplaying American maroonage and valorizing white involvement in the Underground Railroad, historians have shown a racial bias. There's been a reluctance to acknowledge the strength of black resistance and initiative. They have also revealed the shortcomings of their methods. Historians are limited to source documents. When it comes to Maroons, there isn't much on paper, but that doesn't mean their story should be ignored or overlooked. As archaeologists, we can read it in the ground. These people performed a critique of a brutal capitalist enslavement system, and they rejected it completely. They risked everything to live in a more just and equitable way, and they were successful for 10 generations. One of them, a man called Charlie, was interviewed later in Canada. He said that all labor was communal. That's how it would have been in an African village.
Okay.
And I think that's relevant to Savannah right now. Tomochichi's Chest, I wrote it in honor of Tomochichi and to talk about what I saw with that monument. Let's talk about the stress in Tomochichi's chest, where a corporate leader towers. He got the powers, but he ain't the best, see? We love the land, take a stand. We cannot have the clan calling the shots, making the stop, hogging the spot, letting Tomochichi's chest carry the lot. The weight of the state, no debate. The fate of native people known too late. Where have they gone? Treaties sown, but no crops have grown. Straight! Only crooked memories dot the land. Where we stand, the people cried, died, heard all the lies. They try and catch their breath when Gullah-Geechee sighs. Yeah, where we stand on the land, many Wachoni again. Where we stand on the land, many Wachoni again. Where we stand on the land, many Wachoni again. Many Wachoni again, many Wachoni again. It's a people's fight, no delight, only the fatal stain. No pleasure in the pain. A nation birth still remains. Where we stand on the land, many Wachoni again. Where we stand on the land, many Wachoni again. Everything's so fluid every day, nothing to it. A system of war with peace blindly running through it. Where we stand on the land, many Wachoni again. Where we stand on the land, many Wachoni again. It's a collective, not invective. We're connected, not cutting parts, not divided, then deflected. Where we stand, many Wachoni again. Where we stand, many Wachoni again. The foundation's unseated when it's all depleted. Only justice and peace are the songs to be repeated. Where we stand on the land, many Wachoni again. It's time to transform the norm, create a love storm, a truth reborn. The needle's eye, where we are formed. Where we stand, many Wachoni again. Where we stand, many Wachoni again. Where we stand, many Wachoni again. Many Wachoni again. Many Wachoni again. We can remove the stress from Gullah-Geechee's chest. This is Gullah-Geechee's chest. Time to create a love storm. Many Wachoni again. Many Wachoni again. Many Wachoni again.
Wow, I don't think the studio has ever seen anything that live, but yeah, that's a powerful piece because when we were down there at the square, it was a very emotional walk, and I don't know that a lot of the tourists really felt what we were feeling when we were walking, and we invoked the ancestors to honor them, and we're talking about a lot of the history, the truth. And it's very angering at times, the things that you're learning for Indigenous people and the Black community as well. Like, if you're not upset by a lot of these things that you're learning, a lot of us don't even know a lot of our own history too. So people were just kind of being spectators to what we were doing. But I really don't know how many of them understood the walk that we were having, the experience that we were having. That was not for show. Right. So when we got to Gullah-Geechee's stone, it was very emotional because we could see, you can plainly see if you understand this history, how disrespectful and how dishonorable it was to have some other man that they deemed greater than Gullah-Geechee, but yet they tell this narrative of this friendship about how Savannah began. But I mean, if you don't understand what's going on there, if you don't see that when you're going to that square, then you're really missing what is going on in Savannah, period. There's this whole narrative that they're trying to show with the tourism. And I think most people don't really, they don't get it. So, but we do. And so we're doing this walk from square to square and learning all this history, and it was upsetting, you know? And I hope that we can get together and do some more educational walks or healing ceremony type things. And I don't know what kind of things you have planned to do too, but you want to talk about that for a minute?
Well, we have long range ideas, plans, and programs and strategies. I can't share those with you here just now, but I can say that we meet on alternate Tuesdays every week. What you can do is, to find out more about that, you can send me an email at now, NOW, G as in Gary, RIOT as in Tom, the numeral 1 at AOL.com. Now Griot1 at AOL.com. And then I can give you more details about where we'll be meeting. And what I'd like to say too is that these stories, because I know people, Savannah, a great trope in Savannah is we already do that. We already got that, but then nothing's done. I can tell you there's a report that just came out from the National Park Service that pretty much says that for 52 years, there's been either increasing lack or a prime concern has been, the lack of African and Native culture in the city for at least 52 years since 1966. And that means more than just slave stories, narratives. That means a comprehensive view or viewpoint or epistemology of people, a narrative, another narrative. So these things have to be woven into the integrated fabric of the city and the narrative. Not a separate museum over here or a separate museum over there, and particularly not an art center that might be on top of ancestral grounds and archaeological sites that are sensitive, and this is actually the case. So it's not that. We're talking about transforming the whole narrative of the city. I think that would make the ancestors happy and smile, that they would know that in 2018, we don't live in a city where colonialism, confederacy, and oligarchy are the central narratives and draws for the city. Everything from the names of parks to different monuments to people's houses to what you don't see primarily. Again, the prime concern, Native and African cultural history. And that's what's happening here. Whether people want to fight back and deny, there's no denying. It's pretty much like science right now. So what can we do? We want to do things to change that. It will take a lot of power. It will take action. It will take agency, and it will not take complacency or complicity in what normally exists. We got to change it. You can't change things at the same level of awareness that created the problem. That's Einstein.
Yeah. All right. So Black and Indigenous community out there in Savannah, let's get this started. Let's tell our own stories and, be able to make a living, live self-sustaining lives instead of the lives that we're living right now, where it's a struggle in Savannah. It's very lopsided in Savannah, and I'm tired of walking sideways.
What is life?
Yeah. So Minnie Wachoni, thank you, David, for being here. And that was just what a way. I'm awake now. So we're gonna play Bessie Jones right now, and Sandy's gonna come in for her show on Human Nation. So. Anything else you want to say? Have a good day.
I see y'all. Peace. Peace. I'm going to receive you.
Bye.